Hello, Whisperers. Settle in. Turn the lights down low. Put on your headphones and listen closely. Before we step into the darkness tonight, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy these stories, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what keeps the nightmares coming. Tonight, we step away from the residential streets and delve into the heart of our city's academic history. Dhaka University is a place of life, politics, and intellect. But within its sprawling campus sits a piece of architecture so grand, so imposing that it almost feels like a living, breathing entity. Of course, I'm talking about Curzon Hall. Recently, I sat down with an older gentleman. We'll call him Tariq. Now, he is a retired professor, but back in the late 70s, he was an MSc student in the physics department. He narrated his time spent trapped in a psychological nightmare within the cavernous depths of that beautiful red brick building. This is a story without monsters, without gore, and without blood. But it is a testament to the fact that true horror doesn't need to touch you to break you. Sometimes it just needs to cast a shadow. I'm going to step aside and narrate the story exactly as Tariq lived it. Take a deep breath. Let's begin. If you ever stood before Curzon Hall, you understand its weight. Built in the early 1900s, its towering Mughal Gothic arches, heavy wooden doors, and vast echoing corridors were designed to make you feel small. During the day, it is a bustling hub of students, but at night, when the crowds disperse and the massive wooden doors are bolted shut, the building changes. It hollows out. It was the winter of 1982. A political climate in Dhaka was boiling as usual, and campus strikes were frequent, pushing our final exams and thesis deadlines to the absolute limit. I was desperate. My cramped dorm room was too chaotic for the level of focus I needed. I began bribing one of the night guards with packs of cigarettes to let me stay late in the upper floor lecture halls. I practically lived in that building for 3 months, and over those 3 months, the building started to notice me. The haunting didn't happen all at once. It was slow, agonizing. It eroded my sanity. It was a predator taking its time, breaking down my grip on reality, one incident at a time. The first crack in reality happened late in November. By 11 p.m., the university was dead silent. I was completely alone in a room built to hold 100 people. The ceiling was impossibly high, lost in the shadows, and the only light came from a single fluorescent tube buzzing directly above my heavy wooden desk. Then, as usual, the load shedding hit. With a heavy echoing clunk, the power grid died. I wasn't panicked. Load shedding was a daily reality in the 80s. I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out a wax candle and a box of matches, and struck a flame. The small flickering orange light pushed the darkness back a few feet, casting a massive dancing shadow of my own body against the red brick wall to my right. I stretched my arms high above my head, working out a knot in my spine. As I lowered my arms to rest them back on my textbook, I glanced at the wall. I was sitting perfectly still, my hands resting flat on the wooden desk, but the towering black silhouette on the wall to my right still had its arms raised. I froze, completely paralyzed. I watched in pure horror as the shadow slowly, deliberately lowered its arms. A full 5 seconds after I had. It was lagging. It was mimicking me. But it was entirely out of sync. I blew out the candle, grabbed my bag in the pitch black, and sprinted back to my dorm. For a week, I convinced myself it was simply sleep deprivation, a trick of the flickering candlelight playing on my exhausted retinas, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. A few weeks later, the building began playing with the space outside the lecture rooms. I was walking down the long, sweeping second-floor corridor to use the washroom. The moonlight was spilling through the ornate archways, casting a repeating pattern of bright silver and deep black across the tiled floor. As I walked, I noticed that the shadows of the massive stone pillars didn't look quite right. I stopped walking. About 30 feet ahead of me, the shadow of one of the pillars was leaning. Stone doesn't lean. The black silhouette stretched unnaturally onto the floor, pulling away from its physical source. As I stood there holding my breath, the shadow detached completely from the pillar and stepped into the center of the hallway. It was a tall, impossibly thin figure. It just stood there, blocking my path, absorbing the moonlight. I clicked on my heavy, ever-ready flashlight and aimed the beam directly at it. The beam cut through the air and hit the far wall. There was absolutely nothing there. The hallway was empty. But then I turned the flashlight off. The shadow was standing 5 feet closer. Slowly, the psychological toll was mounting. I felt hunted. Yet there was nothing physical I could point to. One unusually foggy night in early December, my brain felt fried from studying everything. I left the lecture hall to take a walk and clear my head. I wandered behind the science faculty buildings to the old pond near Curzon Hall. The campus was dead, as expected. The water was perfectly still, resembling a massive sheet of black glass under the hazy moon. I sat on a concrete bench near the water's edge, exhausted, resting my elbows on my knees and putting my head in my hands. After a few minutes, I looked up at the water. The pond perfectly reflected the pale moon, the silhouettes of the surrounding Krishnachura trees, and my own hunched figure sitting on the bench. I sat up straight and stretched my neck. The reflection of the trees remained still. The reflection of the moon remained still. But the reflection in the dark water didn't move. My reflection wasn't moving. I was sitting upright, but the black shape in the water was still hunched over, its head in its hands. And then slowly the reflection in the water lifted its head. It didn't have a face, just a void. But I could feel it looking directly at me. I stumbled backwards, tripping over the wet grass, and ran all the way back to Fazlul Haq Hall without looking back. The worst part of the psychological horror is that it isolates you entirely. The next morning, sitting in the crowded dining hall of my dorm, I tried to tell my roommates. I told them about the lagging shadow on the wall, the empty corridors, and the terrifying reflection in the pond. They stared at me for a moment, chewing on their food, and then burst into laughter. Exam fever, Tariq. One of them chuckled, slapping my back. You're reading too much physics and, well, not sleeping enough. Or maybe you might have been smoking something that, well, we're not really aware of. No one believed me. They told me I was going crazy from the stress. I had never felt more alone in my entire life. I was trapped between my desperation to pass my degree and the silent, shadowy predator living inside Curzon Hall. By mid-December, I refused to stay past sunset. Instead, I tried to study in the late afternoons when the halls were mostly empty, but daylight still bled through the tall arched windows. I was sitting in the same lecture hall around 4:30 p.m. The winter sun was dipping low, casting long, dramatic shadows across the concrete floor. Then I heard a scrape. It was the distinct, heavy sound of a wooden chair being dragged across the floor. It came from a few rows behind me. I turned around. The rows of elevated seating were completely empty. I slowly turned my back to my desk, my heart hammering. I looked down at the floor beside my desk. The afternoon sun was casting my shadow clearly onto the concrete. But right beside my shadow, sliding silently across the floor, was the flat 2D shadow of an empty chair. There was no physical chair beside me casting it. It was just a shadow, existing entirely on its own. Then a second shadow slid into view. It was that same tall, unnaturally thin silhouette I watched. At this point, I'm hyperventilating as the shadow slowly sat in the chair beside me, the non-existent chair beside me. Instantly, an immense crushing weight fell onto my shoulders. It felt as if the localized gravity in the room just went up. I felt like I was pressed down into the wood of my desk, my spine bowing under the unseen pressure. My chest started tightening, making it impossible to pull oxygen into my lungs. Right next to my left ear, in the empty, freezing air, I heard the sound of a deep, wet, rattling inhalation. Something invisible was breathing right beside me. Just as my vision started to blacken, I heard the heavy footsteps of the daytime guard echoing in the hallway. The moment the guard silhouette passed the doorway, the crushing weight just vanished. And all those shadows I saw, gone. By January, I was a shell of the human being I used to be. But my final thesis submission was due. I had no choice but to finish it up. I was back in the hall at night. At exactly midnight, the power failed again. This time I brought out my torch, lit the candles with my trembling hands. I kept my eyes entirely glued to my notebook, terrified of what I might see on the walls. But the horror of the night didn't stay on the walls. Out of my peripheral vision, I saw the black void peel itself off the red brickwork. It remained a flat, pitch-black stain, but it was sliding across the concrete floor, gliding gently, silently, menacingly towards my desk. As it approached the edge of my candlelight, the physical reality of the room began to completely break down. The pages of my book was flipping. The wax on my candle began to harden abnormally fast, choking the wick as the temperature dropped to freezing. I felt the icy pressure of long fingers wrapping around the back of my wooden chair. The flat black shadow on the floor slid directly underneath my feet. The crushing gravity returned, pinning me so hard against the desk, my ribs ached. It felt like the darkness itself had gained sentience. At this point, Tariq told me, his voice still trembling after decades later. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to know that it could. It wanted to establish absolute undeniable power over my mind. The shadow on the floor slowly slid forward, creeping up the front of my wooden desk. As the black stain passed over my textbook, the heavy book violently slammed shut. I sat there paralyzed, a prisoner in my own body, as that void slid down towards my flickering candle. It didn't blow out the flame. The darkness simply crept up the side of the wax and swallowed the light whole, plunging that grand hall into absolute suffocating pitch blackness. The moment the light vanished, the invisible gravity released me. I threw myself out of the chair, scrambling blindly through the dark, and sprinted for the heavy wooden doors. I burst into the corridor, running down the grand staircase and into the cold night air of the campus. I didn't stop running until I reached the bright gates of Dhaka Medical College. I never went back to that specific lecture hall. I paid the guard to retrieve my bag the next day. I passed my exams, got my degree, left Curzon Hall and Dhaka University behind forever. I'm an old man now, Tariq told me at the end of our interview, taking a slow sip of his tea. And I'm glad I left that place behind. I'm glad I survived it. But the truth is, you never really leave these horrors behind. He looked down at his feet. To this very day, decades later, whenever I walk under a bright street light or sit near a candle, I still check to make sure my shadow is doing exactly what I'm doing. That was Tariq's story. Today, Curzon Hall still stands, as grand and imposing as ever. Hundreds of students walk its halls every single day, completely unaware of the heavy, unseen history that settles into the bricks when the sun goes down. If you ever find yourself studying late in an old, echoing room and the power suddenly fails, pay very close attention to your shadow. If it moves before you do, don't wait for the lights to come back on. Just run. Shubhoratri. Sleep lightly.